Hello, everyone. I'm KASIA HANSON, and I'm your host and moderator for today's IIFX Fan-Centric Town Hall, Women in Sports and Entertainment Taking Charge and Making a Difference. Fan-Centric Town Hall, Women in Sports and Entertainment Taking Charge and Making a Difference. Make a difference in sports and entertainment industry at each step of the fan journey. The Fan-Centric series of podcasts and events explores the people, processes, and technologies that shape the premium fan journey throughout the global sports and entertainment industry. This is the third installment of the IIFX Town Hall series featuring women in sports and entertainment security, and made possible through a collaboration with the Security Industry Association's Women in Security Forum. This town hall will feature impressive women leading the way in sports and entertainment industry, and especially in security. So if you have questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A, and we will be checking those and making sure that we answer questions. And we'll go ahead and get started. I want to make sure that we do take some time for introductions. We have some very, very impressive women on the panel today. So I first want to start with Cheryl. Cheryl, will you please do an introduction and tell us about yourself and your background, which is super impressive. I'm like, I can't even tell. I'm like fangirl of both Holly and Cheryl here. So please tell us about your background and maybe a fun fact about you too.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Kasia. So once again, my name is Cheryl Moss, and I am actually the CEO of Guardian Zone. But I got started in my career. I was a U.S. diplomat and a senior foreign service officer for more than 25 years for the U.S. Department of Commerce, International Trade Administration. And my job was mostly to help U.S. companies go international and find and locate international markets, actually work on bilateral agreements between the United States and other countries. However, as a senior member of the embassy, I was also part of the ambassador's country team. I was also part of our emergency action committee, and I was the Department of Commerce's local representative for the OSAC committee, which is the Overseas Security Advisory Council. And so that's kind of where I started getting my first taste of security. But I think the biggest moment came during 9/11, when I was posted in Mexico at the US consulate. And it was 9/11. We were actually at home because there was a situation in Mexico. We were watching the planes go into the Twin Towers. And at the same time, we were getting bomb threats at the embassy, at the consulate. And that was my first security kind of issue. And I was like, okay, they're going to evacuate us. They're going to whatever. And what they said to us was, no, you know your area. We want you to be part of security. And so ever since then, that's always been in my mindset. And so after serving 25 years in 6 different countries, high threat, high crime countries, from South Africa to Amman, Jordan, during the Iraqi war, I created Guardian Zone, which is a company that is really based on what I learned in the Foreign Service for security for our families. I tell people, I hate to think about it, but in 2015, my cousin was the minister for Mother Emanuel 9, and the active shooter that came in there and killed them. And I said, that happened. And then a few months later, we had a Bataclan theater in Paris, and it was an area where my husband and my family had vacationed. And I said, those two things brought together to me that I want to do something to change the world. I want to be a part of this. And so I created Guardian Zone, and Guardian Zone really is a technology company that has created a cloud-based incident management technology with a mobile app that allows for crowdsourcing information for security. So I tell people a lot of times, if you know Waze and how you use Waze on the highway, we want to use Waze, Guardian Zone like Waze, to help our security officers at stadiums, at concerts and festivals, to keep people safe. Guardian Zone was created, and really we took off around COVID, which, as everybody knows, nothing was happening during COVID. So we've really come out of this. We still see ourselves as a startup. We came out of the Microsoft startup program, but we see ourselves as really looking at the best way to contribute and communicate when an emergency is happening at facilities. So I'm happy to have been invited here today. I am a silver member of IIFX. KASIA invited me here to talk today, and I look forward to expressing and showing and just sharing who I am with all of you on the call today.
And thank you, Cheryl. And Cheryl's also an active member of the Security Industry Association Women in Security Forum. So, with this mindset of giving back, right? And I know we're going to talk a little bit about, being of service, which you certainly have been for a long time. Well, thank you for joining, Cheryl, and taking the time. I also want to introduce Holly. And Holly, you have an equally impressive background. And so I'm so excited for you to share with the audience your background.
Oh my goodness, thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. I am so happy to be here and spend this time with you all. Cheryl, of course, thank you for your service. Anytime people are putting themselves in harm's way for the better good of our country, that is a sacrifice all of its own, and I know that very well. My name again is Holly Drains. I am the founder and CEO of Elite Strategy Consulting and Risk Management Incorporated. We were founded in 2017, August of 2017, so we are a little over 6 years old. The company is a strategic security and risk management solutions provider. So what we essentially do is work with our clients to close those gaps, to help clients to identify what their gaps are, whether it's in their personal footprint, their professional footprint, and any of those areas that can be touched and by their very nature cause you to be exposed and vulnerable. Those are the things that we solve for. We provide assessments, we provide tooling, and then we provide that good guidance to figure out how to close those gaps, whether it becomes a physical security solution, an executive protection solution, an overall policy assessment and development solution. So we are those solutioners. I am very proud of my team. Most recently, we did make for the first time the Inc. 5000 list. We are very happy for that business accomplishment. That just lets us know that we are moving in the right direction and we are being recognized as such. How the company came to be, a little about me. I kind of went backwards. That's where I am now. But how I got there is I don't know everyone's background, but I'm excited to get to know this audience. But I am a product of a single mom from the urban city of Hartford. And that is what made me. If anybody knows about raising a child using the community, that was me. I did everything from the camps to the volunteer programs to wherever she could stick me, the youth programs, to get that exposure. That said, it ended up landing me in a space of criminal justice. Coming out of college, I joined the space of criminal justice. I went back to my city, joined their police department, stayed there for just about 6 years. And while I was in grad school, because my mom was a big proponent of do things while you have the opportunity to, because you never know what life is gonna deal you. While I was in grad school, I met up with someone who had left the police department who recruited me for the Secret Service. I was not looking for the United States Secret Service. It was not on my trajectory. I liked being a city police officer, especially in the city that made me. And I took pride in it and I loved it. And so this was not anything that I was looking for, but I will tell you a sweet story. You said, tell a fun story. So usually when we're switching jobs, it's because, at least for me, it's because something has not gone well or, it was none of those things. I am blessed to have had a career where when I have left, it's because an opportunity presented itself that I wasn't looking for. And so that said, I actually went back to the interim chief of police at the time, which in these days, they're like, you went to your employer to ask about going to another job? So I did. It was different back then. And so again, with mentorship and guidance, I asked the interim chief about what he thought. And he was so kind, so kind. He said, I'm going to talk to you like I would talk to my child. He said, the only reason why I knew that Hartford is where I needed to be is, he said, because I wasn't afraid to try things. I wasn't afraid to move around, to know that this is where I was called to be. So with that, he said, I want you to try it. He said, and if it's not where you're supposed to be, he said, you have done great work here and this will always be home for you. Just come on back here. So with that, I went on to the Secret Service, and that's where I remained for many, many years. I did do the presidential detail. I am grateful to have been selected for that time in office. My time was the 44th administration, when they were reelected for their second term. I did time of security, traveling globally with the president, the first lady, their children. I was specifically assigned to former First Lady Michelle Obama. But then, of course, I supported other details as well. Former National Security Advisor Susan Rice, and Senior Advisor Valerie Jarrett. So it was a beautiful time of service to the country. And I still would have been there, if I'm being honest with this audience, because that's what it's about. But unfortunately, and we'll talk about it, life sometimes will give you a pivot, and I experienced an unfortunate tragedy. And life will do what life does sometime. And so I lost my mom and I lost my sister in the same year while I was in service to the 44th administration. And I had to make a decision. And it really wasn't one to be made, to be honest with this audience. My sister had one son, and that became my responsibility. So I left the Secret Service proudly to raise my nephew. And so from that void, if you will, the Elite Strategy Global brand was born. So that's kind of a little bit about me. That's who I am, walking in a purpose that I didn't even know I would be walking in. And so I'm really excited to be part of this conversation and share everything and anything that I can that's useful in this space.
Thank you so much. And it was so cool to hear about Holly's experience protecting President Obama and his family and the service. So thank you both for your service. I mean, it's just so impressive. And I know, we're talking sports and entertainment security here, but the reality is security just overall is so important, and especially women in security, which is where we really want to grow, right? We want to grow women's opportunities in security, and you both have had such amazing careers. And so I want to kind of start off with some lessons, right, that we've learned in our careers, and helping young women get into security, right? Sometimes they say, if you don't catch someone like a young woman by ninth grade, let's say for STEM, you kind of lose them, right? They get influenced by their friends, but, capturing young women when they're in this mindset of making a decision about where they want to go in their career. And I know too, oftentimes I hear from security practitioners in sports in particular, is like, well, do I have to be from law enforcement in order to get into security, right? And to your point, Holly, sometimes your career, these navigations happen that are unexpected, but they end up being some of the most amazing things that happen. So I guess my question, I'll start with Cheryl, is, what are some of the key lessons you've learned along the way in your career that young women looking into security and even advancing their career anywhere? I mean, the reality is we want to, offer advice, lessons, feedback. So within security for sure, but, what are some of your lessons you've learned, Cheryl, along the way that maybe young women can capture?
I think the biggest lesson I learned is not to be fearful, and it's okay to be first. I've been first a few times, and it gets a little scary. Sometimes I'm the first African-American, sometimes I'm the first woman. But it's okay to be first, because in order to make change, you got to be inside. And Thurgood Marshall used to say that, you know what I mean? He was the first African-American Supreme Court justice. And he said the only way to change the laws was to be part of the law, part of the people who make the laws. And so that's how I look at security and look at what we're doing as women and women who are older, who are trying to bring people in. It's okay. It's okay to be first. It's okay to be the only one in the room. Just go in and do your best and shine, and they'll recognize you. And once that first goes in and they go, wow, this person's amazing. Why didn't we open the door sooner? that now the next one comes through and the next one comes through. And when you have the opportunity, pull one up, grab somebody's hand and introduce them to that market.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. It's okay to be first.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Holly, what are some thoughts on being first and lessons that you've learned along the way in your career?
I would say absolutely. Cheryl made a great point. Don't be afraid to be first. Sometimes first it can be a little scary, it can be a little daunting, it can be a little pressure, because now that you are first, there's a level that's expected of me, and what does that continue to look like? And so sometimes we translate first with, at least for me, the striving to be perfect, and the two are not synonymous. It is okay to figure it out. It is okay to need to pivot. It is okay to make mistakes. It is okay to be first, and to be in the room and say, let me get back to you on that. Let me hear what the other thoughts are in this room. Just because you're first doesn't mean you also have to have every answer to everything. So as I've learned, and I have a good support system in this role of CEO, is there is respect in saying, that's excellent. Let me get back to you on that. Or what does this team think? Let's talk through this. I don't know what the best answer is in this scenario, but I think if we talk it through, we can come to something that makes sense for the greater good. And so that would be my advice to people is, don't be afraid to make mistakes. Don't be afraid to be transparent about the support you need, because it doesn't make you, it makes you leaned in on what you want to do. And don't be afraid to be honest. I think sometimes we hold things in because when, at least for me, and I will caveat by saying, at least for me, there's a fear of, if I say the wrong thing, will they think that I am not skilled enough for where I'm seated?
Right. Yeah.
And so that's what I would offer: to speak your truth, ask your questions, and don't be afraid of what across the aisle may or may not be thinking. You have to just lean in the purpose and the path that's for you.
Yeah, that's so great. I mean, I agree. I had a situation in my career long ago where I was meeting with a very high-powered media executive, and he was a technology executive, went to MIT, and it was extremely, I didn't go to MIT, so but the reality is, you have to be able to say, you know what, I don't know, but let me get back to you. And one of the best pieces of advice I got was, he's like, just keep doing that, because I trusted you. You were going to do it, and you closed on it, and you came back, and you were honest with me. You didn't tell me what I wanted to hear, right? And I do think your advice is like, well, the pieces of advice will help women. It's okay to not be perfect either, right? And it's okay to not be I've heard people say, like, being the smartest person in the room. Sometimes if you are, you might be in the wrong room, right? We put this pressure upon ourselves to have all the answers, to your point, and it feels good sometimes to not have them, and then to go explore and count on, like you said, Holly, counting on your team and having faith in your team, to help you with that.
Yes. And I tell people all the time, it's my team, and I'm grateful for their expertise, because I had someone give me a good piece of critique as a new leader. And they said, if you have all these people around you that are subject matter experts in these individual areas, you do yourself a disservice if you don't let them blossom in them. So I love surrounding myself with my team, because that's what makes me a good leader, is to allow them to lead in the spaces that they've been given to lead in.
Yeah. I think as we look at that advice, in your opinion, as we look at teams and bringing younger women into security and inspiring them to start a role in security, right? what do you think we need to be doing more of? So Cheryl, maybe I'll throw that over to you, and then we'll go back to Holly, but feel free, Holly, to chime in too. What do you think we need to be doing more of to help women advance in security, right? And we know security is a heavily male dominated. I think we're moving the needle one bit at a time, right? So I do see some progress, but what do you think we need to be doing more of?
I think what I find, and as you mentioned, I am a member of Women in Security Forum with SIA, and I'm actually on their one of their committees, actually on more than one of their committees, but also their steering committee. And what I see is that women communicate differently than guys. And what we're always told is, well, you're in a male-dominated industry, you need to talk the way the guys do so they understand it. But I think going back to even what Holly said, you got to know your own truth. And if I'm talking in somebody else's voice, am I being me? Am I giving what I want? And I think what we should teach young women is, and coming in this industry, and what they need mentors. But as what we talked about earlier, they need sponsors. They need people who, if they see somebody who is a rocking and rolling young woman who has lots of potential, take them under the wing, take them to meetings, take them and introduce them to different people to get them that exposure, but also to open it up their eyes of what's available and what's possibilities. Because if they come in your organization and they're at the very bottom and they're very junior, but they're never allowed to see anything beyond the veil, how do they know where to go? How do they know how to grow? And they may even leave your company to go find a better position, and you could have actually groomed them for the next level in your own company.
Yeah. And I love that you brought that up, the sponsorship versus mentorship, right? Yes. And there is a difference that we all talked about before we came on here. Holly, do you have anything to add? I know we talked about the sponsorship piece with you as well. And any thoughts on what more we need to be doing to help women advance?
Sure. So I completely, and I definitely agree. There's a difference between mentorship and sponsorship. And so I think our duty, one of my protectees told me once, and I'm paraphrasing so that if I get it wrong, people don't judge me, and charge it to my head and not my heart. She said, it is everybody's responsibility to leave this world a little better than you found it. And I truly believe that. And what she also said is that takes work, that takes effort, and it takes intentionality. And so when it comes to mentorship, it is your responsibility to help the next one, which means it's going to take time for you in a space where everyone's bandwidth, or at least mine, I can't speak for everyone, but my bandwidth is tight. You're going to have to carve out time to make sure that you're doing that. And I think that's what she was getting at. It's good. It's easy to say these things. It's a lot harder to see them through and deliver on them effectively. And I see that in a space of sponsorship. As a woman-owned security and risk management business, sponsorship, I would argue not just in our space between Cheryl and I, but in other spaces, sponsorship is a real responsibility for other leaders that have passed certain benchmarks. And so if you know that you have passed certain benchmarks, and you know that this was not an overnight sensation, the work that it took to get here, there is someone on Instagram, and I'm not a huge Instagrammer. I am up there because people tell me that is the way the world is right now. So I lean in and I'm trying to do my part. Secret Service, we are just not forward. Look, our protectees are forward facing. We're making sure that they get in and out safely. That's our whole job. So it's been a bit of a pivot for me in my 40s to kind of lean into the space. But I was on one of the sites, and one of the young ladies, she started a clothing brand, and in her most recent piece of her clothing, I believe it says refer her. And that was all it said, refer her. And I feel like it goes back to that sponsorship piece. take someone and refer them into the space. Take the time to see that relationship through. Because what I have experienced myself is that there's a lot of people that say, I definitely want to help you. I definitely want to introduce you in these spaces. But again, bandwidth gets tight. So they'll make the introduction, but then sometimes it'll fall flat, right? Because the relationship is between those two and you're trying to establish a relationship. So I would say, understand the importance of sponsorship and be willing to see it through. See it through for that person. See it through to that contract. I will make it plain. See it through till that contract is executed. See it through for them and know that they will do the next for someone else. And so that's the bigger thing with sponsorship. Yes, make time to introduce, but also be willing to stay in there, realizing that is your relationship and you know from which you came, and help that person see it through.
I love that.
Can I just add one more thing to that? I think a lot of times people kind of know, it's like, if I'm an African-American woman and I meet another African-American woman, there are certain things that we share, and there are certain things that you automatically assume that you share. And when you're looking at the security industry and it's predominantly men and it's predominantly white men, they when they meet each other and when they meet a young guy who's coming up, they see themselves. They remember how they were. They remembered all the help they needed and whatever. And so they'll take that person under their wing. And it's not even like they don't want to. Maybe they don't feel comfortable when they meet that young woman or that young woman of color. And so they don't reach out to her, or when they pass the young guy off and say, hey, I want to introduce you to somebody and walk you in this room. They walk him in a room of another guy who looks at this kid and goes, I remember. And sometimes, and this has happened to me, where they go, oh, they're going to love you. They're going to love you. I'm going to set up an appointment. And you go to that appointment. And I walk in the room and I'm like, you know, and I'm like, you know, did you tell him I was a woman? How did you tell him about me? And you can almost feel in there, and it's like they're talking to you, but they don't feel that comfort. Now, being a diplomat, and you know, I walked in many rooms, you know, especially when I was in the Middle East and different places. I've been taught to try to make people feel comfortable with me, right? And so, as a woman in the Middle East, that was the head of the Department of Commerce, and I was leading our, you know, efforts there. I needed to, when I went to a minister's office and he was Muslim and he was not going to shake my hand, but he shook all the other men's hands in the room. I had to be able to make him feel comfortable because it already started the meeting off awkward, right? So that's one of the things that I've learned. And so I try to use that as often as I can, but I will be honest and say sometimes it still doesn't work. And I think it just depends who they are and where they are in their journey of exploration. Some people are like, I'd like, you're fantastic. You're great. I'd love to see how I can help you. And there's quite a few people out there right now that are doing that for me. But I've also had people that almost like, I don't know what to do with you. You know, you're nice, but I don't feel comfortable. And you know what? That's okay too. But we have to realize within the industry, it can't be so widespread that there's no room for new people and new blood.
Yeah. No, that's so well said. And I think that your story about the meeting in the Middle East too, you know, you're right. Like you do, it's the responsibility of helping others. I think that's partly in being a woman too. We kind of take this on ourselves to, you know, make others feel comfortable, where I think it's all of our responsibilities, right? To be open to whoever's in front of us, right? And I know not everybody's like that. To your point, Cheryl, like, it's okay if you don't know what to do with me and you don't want to help me, that's okay. But you know, but I think hopefully there's more people that are saying yes. But I think, we talked earlier about, you know, this role of technology and shifting, and this, you know, you both happen to own a company. And I think it's so important for us to also think about how we help women of color as well, right? We talk about women in security, and yes, we want to help women and we want to grow women in security. I mean, we're all women, right? But we also know that in some cases, there's statistics that, you know, women of color are not advancing as fast. And so how do we change that, right? And I think both of you are obviously in a good position to provide your perspective on that. And what can this audience do, right, to help recruit, retain, sponsor women of color? Because I think it's just so important. And I mean, look at both of you. You guys have these amazing careers of service. And I couldn't think of two other women that could give some wonderful advice here for that. So what do you think we need to be doing more up there to help women of color?
You want me to go ahead and answer that one?
Sure. Yeah,
I can, whoever wants. Cheryl, you want to go first, or would you like me to? I'm happy to.
Actually, I've been going first all along, so you go ahead and start. Maybe I'll piggyback on your answer this time.
Yeah. Okay. So I think one of the first things that we can do is, for me, is just to be transparent about the conversation. The same way you just brought it up here. You're like, what can we do? Don't let it not be the elephant in the room that nobody wants to talk about. I love having really courageous conversations with people. And I think that's where you start, is being willing to have the conversations, because there's sometimes the level of effort that it takes to course correct in certain areas, people are just not aware of. And so, first of all, be willing to sit at the table and have that conversation. I think some of the other things that we can do, and I heard this from an actress and was being interviewed about the same thing, woman, lack of diversity. And what she said was, in summation, is use your platform. So when you have an opportunity to lean in, one of the things that I did before I joined the service is I remember I opened with, I worked at the Hartford Police Department. One of the things that they did is they moved me into recruiting because they knew that there was change that was necessary. And so what they said is, we're going to give you a budget along with your partner, and we want to see how we can affect change. And so I think being mindful of it, having good conversation about it. And when you have a platform, like we're female business owners, I also have a village. When you have a platform and you can speak into the minds of these, I get calls myself. Can I just talk to you about my aspirations and my goals? Can I talk to you about where I'm working now, where I want to go? Can you send me your resume? Send me your information. Where can I help? Because I am still growing, even though I am a business owner. I am still growing in my own craft, and I have not forgotten from which I've come. And so what I can do is be intentional about the same calls that I need folks to answer for me on my end at my level. Let me walk my own talk and answer those same calls and emails when someone else needs to be heard or to be seen. So I really think that really boils down to, and it's not a race thing, but it's an accountability thing across all.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting because coming out of the Foreign Service, and the reason why I created Guardian Zone, I didn't go, hey, what industries is that going to straddle? I just saw a need at the time. And I was like, I want to fulfill a need. And I started doing research on the need and what was out there, and how do people gather information, and how do people talk at stadiums. Yes, there's technology there, but can we have better technology? Can we have other things that are there? And then I realized, wow, I've just joined two industries that barely have any African-American women in it, or women, right? I joined security and I joined technology. And I almost was like, my husband was like, I feel like I'm pushing this huge boulder up the mountain, and just as I get up there, it rolls back down, and then I start again. and that's how it feels someday when you're out there, talking to people, and you just feel like they're not opening up, or they're not going to give you a chance, or they're not even just seeing you, right? Not even seeing you. Yeah. And I told my husband, I said, look, I started this because I had a belief in it. And I said, I came from someplace and I've seen things. And I said, I helped other people along the way get where they need to go. I just need to find the right people who want to help me.
That's right.
They're out there.
That's right.
And
they
so, and so you're finding people who are willing to help you, people who, hey, I want to do business with your company, right? Not just because you're African-American, it's a great product, but now I want to do it because I like you too. right?
That part.
And I want to do something.
Yeah.
And I think that that's okay, because right now there still is such a deficit of young women in security and in STEM. You asked a question about community. I'm a member of this organization called DFW ATW, Dallas Fort Worth, what is it? Alliance for Technology and Women. And I was more active before, not as much now because I'm doing some other stuff that I'm trying to do. But they had a program last year where they had like a STEM workshop for young girls that were middle school to high school, and for the ISD, the Independent School District. And I was on a few of those calls and talking to the girls about, and most of the women worked for tech companies. And I was the only one, actually, no, there was another woman. There was two of us that were entrepreneurs. So this is where you can go. And you mentioned earlier about STEM, like, you know, if you don't get in by the time you're 9, whatever.
Yeah.
Well, I got in my 40s. So, so there's help before us yet. So what that tells you is, even when, so even when they say, you know, get in at this point, we should be saying, look, if you want it bad enough, if you're willing to do the extra work, if you're willing to do everything it needs to get it, you can have it.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm a firm believer of. If you want it bad enough, you can do it.
Go after it. That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Well, it's like I've heard the saying, you know, about the glass ceiling, right? And certainly there's a lot of cracks, but, you know, other women, to your point, Cheryl, will say, no, I am building the ceiling. Like, I know where the ceiling is, right? And everybody's welcome. And you know, I do love what you said. I'm making notes because some of your comments are so, are just so worth remembering in this conversation. And that is, I love what you said about having courageous conversations. And then of course going back to the beginning with like talking about fear, right? And it's okay to be first. And then STEM, I mean, Cheryl, getting into it in your 40s, that shows there was no fear there whatsoever, which is amazing. And we need to be that way. We need to be fearless in our pursuit of what sets our soul on fire, right? I know that's a quote out there that's on the internet too. I'm not big on Instagram either, Holly, but I get some good quotes.
Some of my best in my 40s.
But and then the transparency, right? I was at the GSX event recently, and I was at a table with you know, a woman who's, you know, part of the LGBTQ committee, or on the committee, the community. And you know, I had never met her before, and she was so nice. And she was telling me about how she's included in these guys settings and what that's like. And I, you know, I asked questions because I was like, honestly, I said to her, I go, look, I don't know. So I'm wondering your perspective on all this, right? And that was at that moment, I felt like, okay, I'm learning more about what it's like to be in that community and what we can do. You know, we're all here on earth together, right? We're all humans. So we should be helping one another, right? And so it was very helpful for me. So I think back to, like, we need to have more of those courageous conversations in the transparency. And if you don't know, ask a question, right? Ask a question. And, you know, you'll be surprised. You may be surprised at the answer you get that's going to help you open your mind in ways that you never thought possible, right? And I think, you know, the other element of that is this, you know, I mentioned community, right? You clearly, the role of community plays a role, whether you're involved in groups or you're leaning into your church community, but that really helps bring along, I think, young women, especially. You know, what do you guys think is the role of the community play in helping women, you know, identify their careers, advance, and you know, what do you think that's an important role that needs to be played? I mean, what's your thoughts there?
Definitely. I think that your community, you know, I was just telling you about being with the DFW ATW. You know, I'm actually getting ready to go to this event on Friday for New Friends, New Life, which is an organization that supports women who are coming out of human trafficking. This is their 25th anniversary. When I was in the Foreign Service and when I was serving in the Netherlands was a gateway for human trafficking. And that was the first time I kind of, being in some of those, rooms and confidential conversation, it's always been now kind of like a passion for me. And so I was like, how do I get involved? But while I'm doing my company, so I was like, how do I do it? So I just do stuff to support them. And I said, if there's anything that Guardian Zone can do or I can do, but I want to be in the room, I want to keep learning about all the challenges. Actually, I just learned that Texas is the second largest, I guess, purveyor of human trafficking in the U.S. This is my state. So what can I do to be a part of that conversation? Yeah. And I always tell people, because people are like, well, how did they get into it? Or whatever. And I said, I can tell you this. When you meet a 6-year-old and you go, what do you want to be when you grow up?
That's right.
It is never trafficked.
Yeah.
They have aspiration, they have dreams. And sometimes where they live and what they've been exposed to puts them in a dangerous position. Yeah. But that's not what they wanted. Yeah. And, unfortunately, if that becomes their reality, then that's what they believe, but it's not true. Yeah. And I think that's what we need to remember. And I think, like you said, how does community is very important. And some communities need it more than others. Mm-hmm. And what is that, I have a good friend who she actually owns a franchise for pizza. And she said, Cheryl, it was really hard. And people who were supposed to help me weren't helping me. And she said, I decided if they weren't going to let me have a seat at the table, I was going to go create my own table and chair set, and that's kind of the mindset. But I think that truly the men that are in our industry, they want to help us. And I think what I learned in my life of 25 years of living in 6 different countries, from Asia to Africa to the Middle East to Europe, is that nobody has the exact or the perfect answer, right? You can have a problem. And I remember having a friend and I looked at that and I was like, oh, well, this is how you solve it. And she was like, why would you solve it that way? I would solve it this way. And that's where I see the beauty of our industry, because if our brothers in arms recognize that we're bringing a different perspective to what we're doing, now we don't have a solution, but we have the best solution.
Yeah.
Right. And that's kind of where I want the men in our industry to understand, we're not coming here to threaten you or whatever. Look, there's enough pie to go around for everybody to get a slice. Yeah. Right. So, but I'm bringing something, and I've heard people go, diversity. And I'm like, but diversity is important. We are a melting pot. We are the actual, as imperfect as America can be, we are the shining light for most countries on how to make this thing work. Yeah. And we don't want to fall now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And so think about that. Women bring a different perspective. I've read different surveys that are put out by different, be it SIA, be it NCS4, be it different things. And sometimes I go, and I'm looking for information on what would be important to a woman. I hear about fights, I hear about slip and falls, but I'm like, are we talking about sexual assault? Are we talking about human trafficking? Are we, are we putting those where they're there, but they're under like just violence at the stadium or something? Pull it out.
Yeah.
I think it's important that we call it out because it's important to women.
Yeah.
And so sometimes we feel, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, your comment on perspective is so spot on, right? And one, I know we talked about community, and getting involved in that human trafficking. I was going to add to your point that behind Texas, in front of Texas is California, which is my home state. So not something you want to brag about, right? But
Right.
it's an awareness. Like I was made aware at GSX, like, wow, I had no idea. I knew it was a problem. And, those are things that sometimes I think people are like, well, it doesn't affect me. It's never
Right.
going to happen to me, right?
Yeah.
But it really does affect all of us because it's affecting our children and it's affecting innocent people. And so I think it's really important. And I think the perspective you mentioned, I was at a conference about cybersecurity and AI, and AI, right? If AI is only developed by one, like if let's say it's just developed by a man, you're going to get an AI that's really one-sided, right?
Yeah.
You're going to get only one view. Whereas if you have AI that's developed by different ethnic backgrounds, men, women, you name it, you're going to get much more completeness in that solution. So I do think that's really important to make sure people understand. And I do agree with you. The industry, I think, is starting to, there's plenty of men in the industry that are very, very supportive, right?
Yes.
They are willing to help, they're willing to talk, they're willing to sponsor. And I think that's great. And we need more of that, right?
Yes.
We need more of that. And Holly, I don't definitely want to hear your perspective on all that too.
No. So I mean, everything that you all said was amazing, and I don't agree with any of it. I think community can be looked upon with different lenses. And so sometimes it's community within your profession, but sometimes it's community within your neighborhood, within your church, within your educational system. And so some of the areas where they asked me to lean in and where I leaned in was that one-to-one contact with the minds of folks that either that are still trying to figure out what direction they want to go. So I don't know if we're doing it anymore. I know that we are. I just haven't done it in a while. But going into the school system, speaking to these children that are still forming who they want to be. Because this conversation that we're now having now is from young women at different stages in their life, determining what they want to be, where they want to be in life. And so I have given those talks to young ones. I have given those talks at different, to younger groups and taken their questions. Like, what are your questions? Your volunteerism matters within church. So I say this to say, yes, I run a business, and yes, I run a for-profit business, but it's equally important to make sure that my experience and the voice that I'm lending does not always have a bill attached to it. So I'm doing these efforts in the church. I am doing these efforts out in the community. We are taking these calls. We are lending our voices to these committees where we're having, I think the biggest thing that we can do when it comes to community, and I said it before, is I said courageous conversations. You have to have, in order to answer any call, whether it's hiring more women, whether it's diversifying, whether it's whatever gap you're trying to close. And you talked about it earlier on when we first started this discussion. It takes more than one voice in the room and at the table. You have to have, and that's what the community is. You have to have diversified footprints, not just in race, but in background, in economic status, in professional acumen, in academia. You need a collection of conversation and people willing to have those conversations. And then that's also how you move the needle. Sometimes we operate, and I know I have been guilty of this, operate in a silo. I know this space really well, and I am 1,000% on in this lane. But then there's this whole other area that requires the viewpoint and the input of others in order for you truly to have the most thoughtful solutioning to what you're trying to navigate through.
Yeah. I love the example of going and talking to young people, right? I did that at my kids. My daughter had a career day and I never had time for it, right? I'm a full-time working mom and I never had time for it. So I went in and, here I work for Intel, right? So I had my Intel slides and literally I was like, okay, I think I need to put these away. But as soon as I moved off of the corporate stuff, I put all the things that I've been able to do in my career, all the like fun things. And lo and behold, the one thing the kids leaned in on was the esports stuff. And
Mhm.
oh, what? Oh, wow, you get to travel, you get to do this.
Yep.
And so then at the back of the room, one of the dads said, I need a job like yours, you know. So that little bit of, you know, I had fun doing it, but I do believe we need to do more of that in reaching younger kids and the younger generation and inspire
Younger kids or
Yeah.
younger adults, because
Yeah.
when you asked earlier about what we can do for the women that are in this space, and I love Cheryl said, I'm in my 40s just going into it. I love that so much. But what we can do is ignite, show them the possibilities, show them, and that's how you also do make sure that they know that this is possible, that this is, you know, people ask me about Secret Service, I will answer every question that I possibly can, because a lot of times what I heard, you know, we would step off the plane and head to the rope line, and I can't count the number of times that I saw someone that resembled a mom figure or a grandmother figure, and they would say, I didn't know that, not even just that that women of color did this, I didn't know that women did this. So those are the, and it was such a sense of pride and excitement to see it. And that's what that's what I would want to offer this group, is to really lean into your space and talk to those folks that are still trying to figure it out. Because sometimes you can get in your own head and determine, I don't see enough of me here, so maybe this is not the direction, or it's a little more difficult than I thought it was going to be. But I think that's where we can also help is, I'm example number one. You got this. You absolutely got this, and you can go this direction.
Yeah. Cheryl, did you have anything to add?
I think one of the things that I would like to add is, you know, like I said, as she was talking for men, I think we really need to give them the credit to the people who are actually doing it. There are men out there that are doing it. We talk about the ones that are not, but there are quite a few out there doing it because they have daughters and they want their daughters to have opportunities. And I think the more, and sometimes that may be where we start as that common ground. We start with daughters, you know, and, you know, we start with wives, we start with what we want to do. I just think that overall, I think in order for this industry or just America to be better, everybody has to have their voice included. Nobody's voice is more important than the others. And if we realize, you know, sometimes we're in security, and I'm always amazed sometimes when I hear some African Americans who are, you know, hesitant with law enforcement, don't trust law enforcement. And I'm like, okay, I can understand that. I wasn't raised that way, so I don't have a natural fear or natural whatever. But you know, things that have happened, I can see where that's happening. And you know, when I was growing up, we had police officers living in my neighborhood, and they were Black, and I knew who they were, and they knew who we were. We went to school with their kids. Now we don't have as many African American officers, so the people who are coming in don't know the community, don't know the culture, be it African American culture, be it Latin culture, be it Asian culture. And I think that's where one of the things that we've lost, that it's sad, but the truth of the matter is we need that. We need your officers if they're going to be patrolling a certain area, because what looks like, is that kid doing something wrong? Could be a kid just selling candy bars for a school. He just doesn't look like the kid in your neighborhood who's selling the candy bars, you know? And so, so therefore, I think in some ways, you know, that's what's really important.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think having many voices, many perspectives all throughout, whether it's in the community or in the workforce or, you know, I think it's been, you know, that's just more and more important. And these are reminders, right? I mean, here we have two CEOs, you know, who can inspire younger women, right? Wonderful advice that you guys have given here. I mean, I've written down several of it for myself. And, you know, I'm not a younger, you know, professional. So, but it's a good piece.
You're as young as you feel.
You're
as young as you feel.
But I do think we have a couple of questions from the audience. So One of them was, I know women get asked this a lot, by the way. I don't know that men get asked this question. So it's about work-life balance, right?
Okay.
And Cheryl, you probably have your take on it. And then Holly, with the what happened in your family, the loss of your mom and sister, and then, immediately raising your nephew, right? This idea of balance, right? We all have things going on in our careers. What would you say, from a tip perspective or advice on how you've handled it or navigated work-life balance? I personally don't think there's like a perfect work-life balance ever, but I would love to hear your perspective.
Yeah. For me, and I said I kind of started this off in my 40s, but it kind of moved over into the other area, that next milestone. We just don't claim that too often. But I've been married to my husband. This year will be 30 years for my husband and I to be married. And he followed my career when we were in the Foreign Service. He was an accountant, so he was able to get jobs with corporations and whatever. So it was really a blessing. But I will tell you, and now he is an amazing man. The work-life balance, we did everything equally for our children. And it's amazing because like even my own father, he's helping out with the kids. It's like, yeah, Dad, he's helping out with the kids. That's his job.
Yeah,
My husband has been one of my biggest supporters. He's incredible. He has also managed to keep and build his own career while at the same time supporting my career. And so therefore we tag team a lot. If I go out of town for business, he's got the kids and he's going to the school and he's doing that. I tell people I would never give him up. Way
to go,
so
Mr. Moss.
To me, yeah. And to me, that's it. It's like I have a partner who allows me to do what I'm doing and who respects me. And we've built this incredible, life together, and we have children. And you've met my daughter, who's graduating in November with her master's from University of Edinburgh.
We were trying to connect her daughter with my son, by the way. So we sat next to dinner, next to each other at dinner.
Yeah.
So this is great conversation.
And so that's what I'm teaching her as well. You hear all these things about, if you're a career woman, it's going to be hard. I don't think so. I think it's what you make time for.
Yeah.
Right. And then meeting someone who understands and respects what you are and who you are. Yeah. It's doable. If believe me, my mother never thought I was getting married. So if I can get married and stay married, anybody can.
And be, a CEO of your own company and the career you've had. I mean, it definitely is. And Holly, what do you think about that? Like, what's your, thoughts on work-life balance? I mean, I have to imagine it was hard in the Secret Service too, to have that kind of balance.
I think I'm speaking to those that are single for whatever their reasons are, whether they have not yet gotten married, don't desire to be married, was married and now separated or divorced, or with whatever the case may be. If you are in the journey as a single person, what I learned is, and it sounds very simplistic, but back then I probably didn't give myself enough of it, but I say it a lot to people, and people that know me like, yeah, we hear her say that all the time. I give myself grace. Yeah. And I say it to other people when I talk to them. I just had someone that had an issue, something earlier today in a business sense. I was like, just give yourself some grace. Like, that's what I have tried to do for myself, because it is hard. Service, I traveled all around the world, and there were parts of me that wondered, did I miss moments that I wish I had missed now with my mom and my sister being gone? My dad passed away already when I was in college. And so this is a very uncomfortable journey, but it's one that I have found joy in. And I read a book that said, seeing beautiful again. And so that's how I navigate it. That's how I've taught my nephew to navigate it. I try to keep things in perspective and give myself some grace. And if I'm tired today, I just say that I'm tired. I just have to be honest. What I do try and do in a professional sense is I do my best to show up for my team so that they know that they are seen. Because that's the one thing that you can do as a leader. You can't ask them to do anything that you're not willing to do, and that's my perspective. So what I can do is say, as hard as they're working, I need them to know that I'm here. So I show up for them. My nephew needs to know that I'm here as he's becoming a young adult. And so I show up for him. But that's the main thing. I would say the main thing that I do in terms of work-life balance, and it's such a single word, but it's an important word to me in my mental health. And because we don't talk about that enough, but we're starting to more in my emotional health, in my physical health, is I give myself grace. Because if I don't, I become completely ineffective in both of those areas, because now I have pushed myself beyond my bandwidth and I'm not, and I'm no longer effective. So that's just what I do.
I love everything you just said. Grace, joy. I think we have some gratitude as part of this. Being of service, like this life, there's so much to it. But I think I always remember when, I don't know who said it, so I can't source it right now, but somebody said, it's like put the mask on in the plane. You know how they tell you before your children, right? Put the mask on, right? And I that always stays
before helping others.
Yeah, and help yourself and take care of yourself. And I think we learned a lot through the pandemic about being overworked and stressed and mental health issues. I think we'll see for many years to come, right? There's a lot more, I think you're right. There is a little bit of a stigma about talking about mental health. And I think we do need to talk about it. And so I know there's some very famous people talking a lot about mental health, and I'm so grateful for that. So I think, the work-life balance, I don't think you're ever 100%, right? When I've been asked that on women's panels, I'm like, it depends on where I'm at in my career, and how much time I'm dedicating. Like I had children as well, and they were a priority for me. And then my career sort of ramped up, and then I was more on the road. And I too had a husband that, people were like, who's taking care of your kids? And I'm like, my husband, like their dad, right? But it's also, I think so important to just give yourself that, to your point, Holly, that grace, and just give yourself that time, and take care of you, because if you're not taking care of you, you're not going to be able to do any good for anybody else, including your company or your job or your career or your family or your community. So I do want to have a couple more questions from the audience. So one of them was around, we kind of touched on this a little bit, but challenges of being a woman in a male-dominated industry like security, right? Or law enforcement, or whatever. So what are some of those challenges, and then maybe opportunities, right? In being in a male-dominated industry? What are your perspectives there?
So my entire career, I have worked with my brothers in blue. So I would say yes, both at the local level and the federal level. The majority of my professional career has been alongside, like I said, my brothers in blue, and I consider them my brothers. I would say the biggest challenge is to just do your job and do it well. I was doing an interview some time ago, and that question came up. And I think one of the challenges is feeling like you've got to, I speak for myself when I say this, is feeling like you have to take it on your shoulders to change someone's mind.
Yes.
I cannot change your mind about me or anything else. That is between you and yourself. What I can do, and I said this in another panel, we were talking to, I believe we were talking to some college students over in DC. And what I said is, the challenge is do what you've been called to do. So for me, it was a police officer, and then it was a special agent. Do what you are called to do, and do it well. Do it thoughtfully, do it intentionally, do it to the best of your ability. Don't feel like you have to defend your place in this space as a woman. And don't let that be your focus. I am great at what I do, and I'm also a woman, and I'm also Black. So I mean, I'm just all these things all rolled into one. But so that's what I would say. I think that is one of the single greatest challenges that I face, is feeling like you have to defend your space. You don't. I just do my job, and I do it to the best of my ability. Are there folks at times that will tell you, probably in your village or my village circle, that you've got to do it. We've heard the phrase, you've got to do it this much better in order to even. Do I understand that I am in a space that doesn't have as much female representation as I would like to see? I do understand that. But I also understand what Cheryl was saying. There's some gentlemen, there's some brothers in blue that respect me for what I do because I am good at it, not because I'm a female good at it. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that's what I would say. That is probably my single greatest challenge, is to let go of people's opinions, let go of their preconceived notions. What you are good at, just go to the table and be good at that, and don't feel like you've got to defend or qualify in a different way than anyone else. Just go in and do your job and do it well.
Yeah, I think, Cheryl, do you have anything to add on that one? I love all of that. I think you're so right. I mean, I wrote that down for myself. So.
Well, I agree with Holly, and I want to add to that, saying sometimes, because she was saying she talked to college kids, and I'm like, sometimes they're graduating and they thought they wanted to do one thing, and then they get out and they don't know what they want to do. And they end up in a company doing something, right? They got a job because they had a college degree and they're in this security company and whatever, but they have no real idea of the opportunities that are there for them. And I kind of go back to what I said earlier. Your boss, your supervisor, your boss's boss should go, hey, we've got a young talent here that's smart, that has potential.
Yes.
Let me walk that person into a meeting with me.
Yes.
And I think because in foreign service, when I was a diplomat, that's what we did. We took the junior officers in meetings with us, with the ambassador, and they sat in there and they didn't open their mouth, but they listened and they understood. And I think I don't see that as much. And I think that's what's also needed. And if they're doing it with other people, but they're not doing it with women, or they're not doing it with women of color, you're leaving a portion of the workforce and a phenomenal part of the workforce out. So my thing is, if you see somebody who has potential, take them into the room with you. Ask them a couple of questions. Ask them, hey, what do you want to do? How do you see yourself in this company? You know, they may say, I want your job one day, you know what I mean? and say, okay, what are you going to do to get this job? How hard are they going to work for it? What are they, you know, I tell people all the time, when I was in the government and I was getting promoted and I was moving on, I said, I want somebody to get my old job. That way I can't go back to it, because my goal is to keep going as well. Right. So I think that's all part of it. So like I said, it's everything Holly said, but I think it's also understanding that sometimes young people don't know what they want to do, or they thought they wanted to do this and then they changed their mind and now they really don't know what they want to do. And being able to just give them some guidance would be great.
I love all of that. I know we have Lou joined us, by the way. So you know, before we invite Lou in to say hello, I wanted to ask you both, for kind of final takeaways. A lot of our conversation really has been around how we grow women, how we advance women, and including women of color too. And then, of course, the challenges we're faced with. And then, of course, you guys are business owners, right? CEOs of your companies. And, we actually, we want people to look into both of your companies, right? We want them to get interested in Guardian Zone and Elite Strategy Global. But what are your takeaways? So I'll start with Holly. Any kind of final advice you have for women and men, by the way, the men that are recruiting and retaining and, helping women grow their careers in security, whether it's law enforcement or any other kind of physical security or whatever it may be. What is a piece of advice you'd like to leave with the audience today?
I would leave with the audience. One thing is advocate for yourself. That is one. And I think that's probably a word that I take to heart all the time, and definitely as a woman-owned and led brand, is advocate for yourself. You have to be willing, because again, we have a lot of people that will support us. We talked about it on both sides today, what we can do to get more exposure, but there's people that want to lean in for us and with us. But if you don't advocate, and that's the other part, kind of what we were talking about when I said I spoke to college students, that was the last piece of advice I gave them, is to advocate for yourself, because there are people that will stand with you, and there are people that will hold the door open, that will assist you in making opportunities, but they can't make what they don't know about. So that would be my first thing, is to make sure you're advocating for yourself. I spend a lot of time on the phone. I spend a lot of time on the plane, going here, there, even if it's a 30-minute conversation with someone. I will fly clear across to California, and I have done it before, just to sit down and meet with someone in person, because building a partnership, building a business relationship with them matters. I have gone. So be an advocate. And the last piece is what we talked about. Refer each other. That sponsorship matters. Yes, the mentorship matters, but once you are in that space, like Cheryl's in that space, and I'm excited to talk offline with her and hear more about Guardian Zone, because I was taking my own notes about how we can use that over here at Good ESG. It is, make sure you're sponsoring, because there's a lot of opportunities. So sponsor people, but sponsor them. What I would add is sponsor them in the right way. See those sponsorships through with the decision makers. I think that's the only thing that we didn't touch on, is a lot of times people want to do the right thing, but they will introduce you into folks that are not the decision makers. Yes. And so the person who's in charge of it, they may not be the decision maker. So connect with someone who's willing to sponsor you, in a position to sponsor you, will put that time in with you, and will make sure you are with the decision maker. So you're also protecting your time and your bandwidth.
Yeah. You're on mute.
I'm on mute. I have a dog here, and she's yawning, and she's very loud when she yawns, so I have to mute it. Cheryl, your takeaways.
I think the biggest thing is don't give up. I grew up in the South, and there were always challenges. I grew up in Charleston. And one of the things that I learned very early on from my mom and my dad was, if you want something bad enough, you can go through the front door, the back door, the window, go in. If you want something bad enough, just do what you're going to do. Dig a hole underneath the wall, whatever it takes. If you want it bad enough, and believe it or not, if you do it, you'll be amazed. At some point, somebody's going to recognize that you're doing everything that you can get in there. And then there are going to be people who want to champion you for that tenacity and who you are. And champions are really important. Holly was mentioning sometimes they introduce you to people who are not the CEOs. That's true. But sometimes those champions can get you to that CEO. So all of these people matter along the ecosystem or the food chain in getting you where you want, but not giving up. Don't give up the first time. You know, I tell young people who are trying to get in the foreign service, I said, a lot of officers took 3 times before they got in. You know, they had to take the exam 3 times. They didn't take it 1 time and bada bing, they're in. Very few do that. So if you want it, it shows how bad do you want it. So.
And sometimes we learn more from our failures than we do our successes, right?
Exactly.
And so that's why I think was it Michael Jordan?
Oh, absolutely.
You know, all the shots that he didn't take, you know,
Yeah.
or I'm sorry about messing that up, Michael Jordan, but you know he's watching.
Your heart was in it. Your heart was in it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Lou, welcome. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate you giving us this platform. Did you have any final words you wanted to say before we wrap it up?
It was a tremendous podcast. Some key words that I really took away today, it really, in my own experiences and my career too, advocacy, taking someone under your wing, that's critical.
Yes.
And open the door for them. I love the comments about going to taking people to meetings and getting them exposed and learning from other people. And that's tremendous. The mentorship comments today. Taking some of that sponsorship, that's what this is all about. And the balanced lifestyle, very critical for especially in our profession. We're, 80 to 120 hours a week kind of profession we're in, right? And you have to have that balance. And I thought, Cheryl, you're talking about your marriage, for instance, and how important it is for the spouse to understand the role of you're playing both professionally and at home. I mean, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And then don't give up is my biggest takeaway. You never give up. And none of us on this podcast have never given up, and actually.
Yeah.
So it's been a wonderful podcast. Kasia, thank you for bringing on, Holly and Cheryl, and hopefully we can do several more during the year here, because all we're trying to do is make our profession better. And really accelerate our talents. That's it, really, in a nutshell. So again, thank you so much, all of you, and thank those that attended too. Thank you for being a participant in this great podcast.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
thank you. And thank you, Cheryl and
Dr.
Holly,
Lou.
for taking the time and sharing all your wonderful knowledge. And again, thank you for your service. I just, so many takeaways for me today. And I know that this will get a lot of follow-on listening, so we'll scale this out. And now I know I made a note for myself to get some t-shirts. So Holly, we'll figure out what those say. I think advocacy, sponsorship, anybody, sponsorship for like, $50 million, that's what I'll take,
Yeah.
But no, I think it's awesome. So I actually think about the t-shirt thing. So I want to wish everyone a fantastic day, and thank you for spending the time. And we will see you on the next one.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Thank you, Kasia. Thank you, Dr. Lou. Holly, nice meeting you. Look forward to working with you.
Absolutely, Cheryl. Thank you so much, everyone. It was a wonderful experience.
Very good.
Thank you.
All right. Are we off, Chris?
Yes, we've come to an end. All right. And actually on the,
That's still recording.
I'm going to stop here.
Okay.
Chris, are you happy, Chris?
Yeah. Hold on. I'm going to do